Put your hands on top of your head.
Well, I didn't.
Now!
Here comes the jam. Getting down with the truth. The only way he knows how to. Girl, Lord, what's his name? We're calling the chief. You're damn right. He's gonna get that sucker. Yo, we track down the truth. You know what a track down the truth. You know and what do they call him? We call him the chief. You're damn right we do. Oh.
And I'll bet your mother had a loud bark.
Good morning. This is Morning Coffee with the Chief. I'm your host, Patrick Jordan, here on Pop Culture Minefield. We're on the YouTube and on Rumble, and you can find us on Pop Culture Minefield's Facebook page and their Twitter feed. We are here every Tuesday at 8 a.m. going over cop shows or crime-related shows and just having fun with some retired law enforcement. We review the shows, and today we have a very interesting show. It's a true story. It's based upon a true story, and actually the title is True Story. It's about a family annihilator. Chris Longo killed his family and then adopted or took the name of a New York Times reporter, a disgraced New York Times reporter, and how these two came together and their story. Now it's a little different, and but it actually was a pretty good movie, and they got some pretty good actors in it. And we'll get to that in a minute. But before I get to my show, I got to do my plug for the Los Angeles Mission. Los Angeles Mission is downtown Los Angeles. It meets the needs of the men and women who are homeless on the streets on Skid Row, and they do wraparound services 6 to 12 months, and their goal is to reintegrate the homeless from the streets and back into society. So here's the thing about it. A lot of the shelters, they just meet the basic needs and allow the homeless to survive, and the LA Mission does that, but then uses that as a kind of a lend-lease. Come on in, and opens the door and just encourages people to take it the next step. Not just a warm bed, not just a shower, not just basic services, but actually recover and get off the street. That's why I like them. And they also have a faith-based element to their programming, so they don't get any government funding. So they do rely on the kindness of strangers. So look up the losangelesmission.org and make a donation today. Now you can also find me on X at LSD Jordan. I do post about a wide variety of things. I've been posting about the fires. I certainly am still posting about George Soros, and I have to apologize to George Soros. I thought it was all him, and now we got information coming out that our own U.S. government was funding the undermining of law enforcement and a lot of other things that I certainly was attacking George Soros for the last several years on my show, Briefing with the Chief on KJRDB.com radio. And but there's so much coming out about USAID. It is shocking to me how much waste, graft, and corruption has been going on. And I will be talking about that stuff on my show, Briefing with the Chief, over the next several weeks. And so just tune in. You can find Briefing the Chief at KJDB.com, Briefing the Chief. And if you go to that page, you'll find all the audio versions of my show, so you can binge with the Chief. But you can also go to KJ's Rumble channel. And now they used to put all these Rumble, all the podcasts behind a paywall after a few days. Now they're keeping them up. So the last several weeks, my shows are staying there on the KJDB.com, or KJRA's Rumble channel. And then you can look at, like my last one, I did talk about Elon Musk, big balls guy. And I just was incensed that, if you listen to the reporting on him, he used one of those monikers, or he made it when he was still a kid. And what did the news media do? CNN, all these ladies who are nearly twice his age. He was 19-year-old now. That's the issue they're making of what Elon's doing. They called this kid out. They shamed him. They blamed him. They did everything they could to destroy his life. And he made that as an impulsive decision as a teenager. and yet that's what they dox him about. That's what they do. It's about anybody who does anything with Trump, and you don't have to like Trump to look at the strategies that they're using to be offended. And I'm offended because auditing government is the right thing to do. There's nothing wrong with that. Anyway, so before we get into my show, I do hopefully, if Martine is ready, do we have the picture of Kevin Major Howard? I don't know if he got that or not. Kevin Major Howard was a character actor. There he is. He's working with Clint Eastwood there from the movie Sudden Impact, and he passed away on Valentine's Day this year. And he'd been on my show. He was probably his most notable role was Rafter Man in Full Metal Jacket. Now he was on my show, and we did Sudden Impact with Clint Eastwood. I did all the Dirty Harry series, and he also helped me review Death Wish with Charles Bronson, Death Wish 2, in which he was a character actor in that show and gets killed by Charlie. And then he came back with the owner of the channel and did Alien Nation. So there's three podcasts with him featured on Pop Culture Minefield. I encourage you to go back and look. But he passed away, 69 years old, having respiratory problems. And one of the things that I enjoy about podcasting, both on this show, Pop Culture Minefield, and my briefing with the Chief Show with Cage Ray on Rumble, is that I get to meet a bunch of interesting people, a lot of interesting people. And so it's in retirement, it's kind of fun always meeting new people because you're doing this stuff. And I met him and I really liked him. He's a strong supporter of law enforcement, and he had a charity called Fuel for the Fallen, where he had souped up a bunch of Camaros and then put the names of all the people who died in 9/11 and the people who went to fight after 9/11. And then he worked with Mike Ashley, a retired deputy, and he did the same thing with the fallen deputy sheriffs and police officers in LA County. So strong supporter of law enforcement. That's a rarity in Holiday, at least that you're public about it. And so we pay our respects to him and his family and wish them the best. I will say what I found about Kevin Major Howard, beyond being just a really great guy, is one of the interesting things of trivia about Kevin is he was killed off by 3 A-listers in movies or TVs. He was killed off by Clint Eastwood here in Sudden Impact. He was killed off by Charlie Bronson in Death Wish 2. And he was killed off by Old Blue Eyes, Frank Sinatra, in a Magnum PI episode. So I don't know if he wants to be known that to be the trivia about him, but I thought that was some interesting trivia. But to thank you for Kevin Major Howard for being on my show. We're going to miss him. I would like to have him back, and so thank you for your art and thank you for your participation here with us today. So today we're gonna like I said, we're gonna do a true story, and it was released in 2015, and it really talks about the relationship between an LA Times reporter and a killer. And the killer is let's see, John Franco plays the killer, Chris Longo, and Johanna Hill plays the reporter. Feckle, I think Michael Feckle is his name. And it was directed by Rupert Goold, and it talks about the killing of Longo's family by Longo that occurred in December of 2001, which was, I call it a family annihilator. He's a family annihilator. But let's bring on our guests, and we'll talk a little bit more about these types of murders, and then we'll get into the movie itself. And the first guest we'll bring on is retired Sergeant Danny Coon. He's been around before. I think he's getting a complex because I only bring him on when I'm talking about these mass murders and spree killers. So, Dan, welcome back to the show, Danny. I know you got a lot of insight on killers. I don't know why I know that, but I just know it.
Thank you, Chief. Glad to be with you again today. No, I'm not getting a complex yet.
Not yet. Okay. Did you watch the show with your wife?
Yeah, we watched it last night, and she enjoyed it. I enjoyed it, and like I told you in the briefing, this is a movie I'd probably go pay to see again.
Okay, good. Well, here I am. I'm just bringing men and women together, wives and husbands together, and make sure they have long-lasting relationships. Okay, so our next guest is Eric. Eric Fox has been on before, but it's been a little while. And hello, Eric, retired Sergeant Eric Fox. How you doing, Eric?
Good. How you doing, Chief?
Now, Eric, he showed me a picture of where he's at today, and I won't say where at, but there's a lot of freaking snow there, and more power to him. All the retired deputies, or most of them, are leaving California and going to places where there's snow. I grew up in snow, and I have no desire to do that. So, probably because I'm just having flashbacks of my youth, shoveling snows, cleaning off cars, jumping batteries, to just because the car doesn't start. And for me, I grew up in a big city with snow, and when you have a really big snowstorm, this is what happens. You got two ruts in the road.
Yeah.
You get one rut to get by the other car, right? You have to move over and you look for an opening. And sometimes they don't, that one guy, if somebody panics, they won't get out of the ruts. No, that, now I'm sure they're much nicer where you're at, but when you're in a big city, it could get ugly, right?
Yeah.
And, but yeah, and when I first moved to California and we had a big rainstorm, I'm watching how these people are driving. I'm going, oh, these people know how to drive in the rain, but I grew up, like I said, I grew up in the Midwest, and you slowed down when it snowed, right? You were a little in California that wasn't their experience lots of times. But hey, welcome and thank you for joining me on the show. Now, did you watch the movie with your wife? I gotta ask.
No, I did not. No.
He's
been ill, so I watched it by myself. Yes.
Well, I guess I'm consistent with the divorce rate, 50-50, right? I'll bring you guys together. Hopefully your wife is feeling better, right?
Thank you. She actually really enjoys murder mysteries. So
okay.
She listens to podcasts all the time on murder mysteries and mass killers, and so I'm going to suggest this one to her. It's right up her alley.
Oh, yeah, and this one's a true story, and that's a curious thing about it. It's and it's really about we'll get into the plot a bit, but let's listen. So the story really is about this guy Chris Longo, who murders his family and then embraces the identity of the New York Times reporter. But I wanted to get into the whole family annihilator thing, and I have to tell you, on the true crime stuff, the first time I remember hearing the term family annihilator coined, I think it was on America's Most Wanted. Do you remember that show?
Mm-hmm.
And there was a guy named John List, and I think we got a picture of him. And they had used aid progression, modeling, like clay modeling, to figure out what he looked like now. But here he is. You're going to see some similar themes here. He was struggling to support his family. He was a strong Christian, and he didn't see any way out. And the best way for him to deal with the pain of them being embarrassed and ashamed and not having any money was make sure that they didn't go through that pain by killing him. Some similar themes here with Chris Longo, but that's John List. Now he planned it all out. He went on the lam, and he found another woman, started another family, and for 17 years. And that was why the story was such a interesting story. Not just that he's a family annihilator, because he killed his mom, killed his wife, and killed his 3 kids. But is that he managed to get away with it and disappear. He was an accountant. He like this show, he took somebody else's name, somebody that he graduated accounting from, and started another accounting career somewhere else. And then when they did America's Most Wanted, somebody recognized him. He was a pretty distinctive looking guy, and he was imprisoned and died in prison. And here's the interesting thing about him: where did they move to? I think they moved to New Jersey, in an old Victorian house, and he was short on money, but they didn't realize that the house they in had this old stained glass Tiffany skylight that was not understood in terms of the value of the real estate people sold in the house either. But I found out later that the interesting thing was that back then, and this, I think he killed him, it was the early 80s or maybe it was 70s, it was worth a couple $100,000. Wow. Just the skylight. Wow. Had he known that, you could sell the skylight, put a new one in for a few $100, and then that would have taken him out of debt and then some way back when. So God was helping him out. He just didn't recognize it. It was right there in front of him. But so family annihilators, Danny, I bring you back because you're into killers, right? And so at least you have some. Think about that. The pain is so bad for this guy, or as this guy Longo ultimately recognizes, he's a narcissist. But these folks who kill like this, they are broken inside. There's something wrong with them, right?
Oh, they definitely have some mental issues. But as you were talking about bringing me back, the killer expert. If I die by unusual circumstances, it'll be a Dateline issue or Dateline series. So that's the joke around our house. This guy had some big time issues. But he had one thing, was he was smart enough. He knew how to play people, because throughout the entire movie he was playing everybody, and so he was smart enough to do that. He just was hung up on, I'm a loser and I can't do anything about it. Well, you're smart enough to play people. Why aren't you smart enough to just pick yourself off the ground and do what you got to do and be a man, instead of someone that goes out and kills your family?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're thinking right? And I think narcissism is somewhere on that scale of borderline personality disorders, right? And they my understanding is narcissism is they believe they have this inflated opinion of themselves, and eventually that wears off on everybody. Everybody else thinks, oh yeah, this guy's really cool, confident, knows what he's doing. But you can have an inflated opinion of yourself, and we worked with guys like this. Come on now, guys and gals. But eventually you have to do the work. You have to show that, okay, this inflated opinion of yourself needs to come out in terms of performance, right? I need to see something from you, right? Because I know when you're, the higher you go, the more people work for you, and you see these guys who talk a good game, but when it comes right down to it, they're all talk and no action, right? And they can survive in civil service, but everywhere else they can't, right, Eric?
Yeah, that BS monitor, that BS light's just going bing, 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 bing.
Well, we've run into them, right? I'm not saying anything you guys don't already know, right?
Yeah.
Right.
There's a few that I still that I talk about that I just shake my head. It's just amazing. So that just they have other people carry their careers. So, but yeah, interesting. Real quick, and talking about these mass murders, is that I was in Lakewood back in the 90s, and Danny, you may remember this. There was a suicide on the 91 freeway. Guy jumped off this bridge, and they go do a death notification to his house. Long story short, they end up finding his entire family dead inside of the house. And it turns out he was an executive at Boeing right there in Long Beach, and he got caught skimming money, and he was going to get fired and arrested. And he got in an argument with a wife, ended up killing his entire family and 2 of their kids' friends in the house. So it was. I
vaguely remember that.
Yeah. And the weird thing was, when we were doing a walkthrough of the crime scene after homicide had finished, in the jacuzzi tub in blood, we find, John did this. And the investigator's like, who's messing with me? And it turns out that was the wife who wrote that in with her own blood. Wow. In case he didn't get caught. They knew who had actually murdered everybody. Very, very, very interesting.
Yeah. It's they can't handle the pain that they're going to go through because I lost my job. Talk about, and it does take a little bit when here I am, the chief. I'm going to say it takes a little bit of narcissism when you go up the ranks. You got to have a little bit of that belief in yourself, right? But but that fits with what we're talking about.
Yeah.
List lost his job. This guy couldn't, as we get into it, Longo couldn't hold a job or anything of meaningfulness, and he couldn't. It was more his struggle with the fact that his inflated opinion of himself, that he couldn't pull it off, right?
Right.
I think with executives too, it's the whole identity they have. Like we talk about the Lakewood guy, they have this identity about who they are, and then suddenly that identity is questioned, and they struggle with that. And the pain, they think that everybody else is going to have the same pain that they have, and so they got to put them in misery, right? That's inferred in the list, or that's what's stated in the list case, but it's also inferred here in Longo's case. I'm sorry, Danny, I cut you off. What do you think?
Yeah, no, that's okay. He was working. It didn't really say what his job at Starbucks was, but let's just assume he was a barista at Starbucks. And had he been working today in Southern California at Starbucks, he'd be making some pretty decent money. But in reality, you can't make a living and support 2 kids and a wife and pay rent and everything when you're at a minimum wage job. And in Oregon, I mean, it's a little bit cheaper in Oregon, but it's still tough along the Oregon coast. And they kind of showed that that's where they lived at in the Oregon coastal cities. So probably
I
up
think
around
when
Portland.
you're a narcissist too, you have to put on the perception that you have it all together, right? I mean, it's funny.
Yeah.
I grew up with 5 siblings, and my wife had 7, right? And we were just talking the other day how they had, let's see, 6 of them were girls, right? And she had
Wow.
4 older sisters. So she says, yeah. I rarely got anything but a hand-me-down. And you know what I mean? In today's day and age, oh my God, in today's materialist society, that's unacceptable,
Mhm.
but that was, fortunately, or unfortunately, depending how you want to look at it, I was the only boy, so I didn't get hand-me-downs, no dresses for me. I got my own show, I got my own clothes, right? But you get this hand-me-down thing, right? Okay, yeah, the same little stained T-shirt as one that 3 sisters wore, and now it's your turn, right? So that's how do you, so we look at our society today, obviously I'm commenting on our society. The materialism also drives somebody who's narcissistic and can believe they have to be perfect. And part of
Right.
that is this manufactured need for us all to look like we're perfect, to have stuff and we're successful, right?
Mhm.
It isn't acceptable just to be a solid blue collar guy anymore. You gotta, you know what I mean? I don't know. I just see that materialism has kind of driven different set of values, and it might spark something in guys like Longo and other folks. I gotta do a mind link with my homicide commentator, Dan. What do you think? So do you think materialism kind of drives some of this thinking of inadequacies by somebody who has materialism, or
Yeah,
somebody who has narcissism?
he wants more than what he has. That's pretty obvious throughout the movie too. That he wants more, he needs more, but he just does not have the direction how to get it. And it goes back to what kind of job you have. You have a minimum wage job at a fast food outlet, trying to raise 2 kids and a wife, and pay rent and have cars, and then go in the beginning of the movie. He goes, well, what if I just take today off? Dude, you can't take the day off because you're a loser. You got to go to work and take care of your wife when you get home. Take care of her other ways. You got to support her first, and you got to make money for the medication she needed to get better or whatever.
And they never really get into how supportive was the wife, right? You hear that she was this idealized version of her. She was great. She was this, she was that. And I don't know, did she expect more? Who knows? They, part of this is faith. They came from, I think, Mormons. I think they were Mormon.
They were Jehovah's Witness,
or
and
Jehovah's Witness.
Jehovah's Witness women are follow along with whatever you say. Subvertive, is that the right word?
Subservient.
Subservient.
Yeah.
They just go along with what the husband's doing and try their best to support their husband the most. And I had when I was going to college, our neighbors were Jehovah's Witness, and I watched what was going on, and I go, man, that's just not how it is. And this was in the 80s. It's not just how it is in the late 70s, early 80s. Yeah. And it just gets worse as it goes on. And so
I think she was clueless, number one, as to what was really going on. And like you said, being subservient to her husband, she just assumed everything was rosy red and everything was fine, and I think she finally started figuring out what was going on.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It kind of fits with a narcissist, though, right? A subservient wife goes along with it, makes it a lot easier. Let's roll the first scene. I call it Family Annihilator, but it also gives us a chance to talk about our other main character here, and that is the disgraced New York Times reporter. Now, did you guys remember this story? I remember reading about this story where this New York Times reporter essentially took a composite of several different stories about human trafficking and slavery in Africa at the time, and put several different stories into one character, and then he ultimately got caught out and he was disgraced. And it's played by Jonah Hill. Now, I've seen him. I think he was in the movie Powerball. I really liked him in that movie. Moneyball, yeah, Moneyball. And I don't know. I just like him as an actor. I mean, he obviously doesn't fit the typical Hollywood leading man here, but he did a pretty good job in this. But this is the story of 2 true stories that come together, right? The killer and the disgraced reporter. So do you remember the story at all, Danny? Did you remember it before you watched the movie?
No, neither story, whether the Oregon story or the Jonah Hill story. Didn't hear about it, didn't care about it. Just, as a matter of fact, when I read about the movie before I watched it, I was skeptical if it was really did happen. until I watched the credits at the end of the movie, did I realize, oh, this is real.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you always wonder on these true stories, because I've done true stories before. I mean, we did on one of my very first shows with you, we did the Onion Field, and no doubt that Wamba tried to get as much of the dialogue and events as correct as possible in the movie. But how much of it gets made up? And we're talking about the guy who wrote the book, this LA Times reporter who got caught for making stuff up, right? So how much of that is actually true, and how much of it, and when you get into the movie making, how much it is dramatization, right?
If you really think about it, I mean, today's news folks, if you call them journalists, I mean, how much of their stories are as bad or worse than what he did back in the day, And so, interesting.
It's actually a lot worse now than it was.
Yeah,
it is, and it's justified. I mean,
yeah.
well, you heard my little lead in on the whole big balls thing, and it's like, and all I could think of is that really, and so the Trump is ripping through the government, whether you like him, don't like him, whether you agree with what he's doing and he's finding waste. And when you don't audit the federal government essentially for 20, 30 years, there's going to be waste. We know it. We've seen in our own department and county government that the budget just keeps going. It doesn't shrink unless there's a significant effort to shrink it. And you have to look in and find waste and cut it out. And it's something that we're all used to. We're all used to the budgetary haircuts, right? All right, everybody, do a 5% cut across the board, do a 10% cut across the board, see what it looks like, and then we'll pick and choose the losers in the organization, right? This is because we don't get to print money. So we have to ultimately come in budget. And when tax revenues go down, city, county, and state government, well, unless you're California run by Newsom, they have to cut, right? And so we're used to that. But federal government, they just print money, right? And there's a lot more going on. There's corruption, I think, in a lot of this USAID and other stuff going on. But here, the news organizations, instead of reporting what they're finding, Musk is finding, Trump is finding, they're reporting about the 19-year-old who's finding it. And looking back at his social history, something he posted when he was 16, and doxing him for that. That's what they call reporting now, which is shocking to me. I mean, I don't know if you guys know that whole story. I did my research, and I go, these people are shameless. I mean, the news reporter. And it was a bunch of women. They had women up there doing it. And I'm thinking, God, could you imagine if, you're some 50-year-old woman who's beautiful and a newscaster, you got a 19-year-old son at home, and look what she's doing to this kid just because he's working with Elon. So I agree with you, Eric. I absolutely agree with you. And just to punctuate it, look at the 60 Minutes used to be one of those shows where, hey, Saturday night I would watch 60 Minutes.
Right.
Right? You remember that? Tick, tick, tick. You watch the show. Now you look at what happened. They had Kamala Harris on, and they edited out her response to one of these, one of the answers, and then took her response to another answer to make her look good. And the more important, obviously, and Trump's right, the FCC, FEC, the Federal Elections Commission, they're right. Hey, you're not reporting when you do that.
Right.
You're advocating.
It went from an actual interview to a scripted show.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they still want to be treated like they're reporters.
Right.
60 Minutes lost I lost all respect with them after the Dan Rather lies and everything. And when that all got exposed, so, I can't watch this show anymore because this guy, I liked Dan Rather too. And his lies get exposed. It's like, man, Maury Safer's got to be rolling over in his grave listening to this garbage. And then you got the guy from, who's the guy from Channel 4, or not Channel 4, from NBC News, who, said he was in a helicopter in Afghanistan and got shot at or something like that. And it turned out that he was a lie. And and these guys are on national TV. And these guys are credible guys that you looked up to. And it's like, no, give me Walter Cronkite back.
Yeah. But you think about who they replaced guys like Walter Cronkite, right?
Yeah.
And what did Walter Cronkite do? And a lot of those guys, they went to war in World War II. They went to Korea. They went there where there were really hot wars. and they're just trying to capture that persona, right? That aura, like, oh yeah, I went to the danger zone, and and it's, well, I mean, Hillary Clinton did the same thing. So I mean, yeah, they shot at my plane, so it's, I mean, just making stuff. I will tell you the story. I was getting interviewed. I was the chief at transit. We had a stabbing on the transit system, so of course everybody's hair is on fire. And this lady, she was from the local Fox affiliate, and she comes up to me and she goes, "Oh, I know why they sent you out here. You have pretty blue eyes, right?" So I'm like, okay, I'm about to get knifed here, right? I knew it was coming, right? And so she kind of butters me up a little bit, puts the mic in front of my face, and she says, "I ride the system all the time. I don't feel safe. What do you say about that?" Completely, blindsides me as best she could, but I knew it was coming, right? So just setting me up to get me to fumble over myself. And of course, I responded. I said that, the transit system is safer than the communities that they run through. If you look at the data, that's what it shows. But every now and then we have an event. But remember, we run through the very same communities that have high crime. We do the best to keep it safe. We have cameras, we have security guards. In fact, you're safer on the transit system than you are in the communities around it. And then we ended the interview, and she goes, "Oh, you kind of handled that okay." I said, "So do you ever ride the system?" "Well, occasionally." So she lied through her teeth to suggest this is how everybody feels, and I feel that same way. And she didn't ride the system. So she's just a liar, and they're all that way. So that's the way I look at it, because there was no point in doing that, but she did it to try and get a gotcha. And that's who they are. And I always tell people, keep in mind, the news media, they're in the business of making money.
Yep.
They're not in the business of telling you the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And when you realize that, you realize, hey, you can watch this show. I don't make any money on this. I don't make any money on my other show. So I'm just in the business of telling the truth, at least through my lens anyways. So yeah. So
that's why I get all my news from Facebook. That's all true on Facebook.
Yeah. And now that you're not put in jail on Facebook, I mean, hey, so one day, hey, our killer, he ends up killing his family, right? And he flees to Mexico, and he takes the name of the LA Times of the New York Times reporter. And of course, he meets a gal right away. I think we got a real picture of the family. Let's throw that up there so you guys can see. And Martine, there we go. There's the family. So he goes down there, and he goes down there and meets a lady. Immediately he starts sleeping with her, some German lady. But this is about the age of the kids when he killed them. I think one was 3-year-old. She looks like, well, maybe she's 2, the youngest there. I couldn't imagine that, wiping your family out at those ages, right? And right, I couldn't imagine. But that is Chris Longo, and let's well, I guess we got to talk about it. So the New York Times reporter, he gets caught. This is the amazing thing about it, right? So you're writing for the New York Times. At least hundreds of well, back then maybe millions were reading it. Now it's hundreds of thousands of people are reading it, right? And somebody's going to ask questions about this, right? Somebody's going to see the pictures you used. It's going to get to Africa in some ways, and somebody's going to question your article, right? It's like writing a false police report when there's a dozen people there that could testify to what really happened, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, to me, that's the arrogance. So how much more did he lie, right? And then he gets caught, and he's shocked that he gets caught. But I think the interesting thing is when he got caught, he had a boss in there. She said, "How could you do this?" And I'm thinking to myself, she wasn't mad when he was selling. In fact, he was one of the star reporters. And if she should have been turning over rocks and checking his stuff out over time, because how often did he do this? Because you don't just do this kind of stuff overnight. So and when a deputy sheriff or a detective lies in the case, they go through all their cases, right? When a DA does it, like Dana Tran, they don't look at any of their cases. But when a deputy does it, they'll go through all their cases, right? And,
that's right.
But somebody like this reporter, you don't do this overnight, Eric. This is something that
I think she caught up in some grief because he made that statement. His wife said, "This is what, number 9 or number 10?" He goes, "I think it was number 9," or she goes, "number 8 or 9." She goes, "Number 10," but who was counting? Grief got in the way, and it just got easy for him to lie. And even when the editor saying, "Hey, you need to proof." He goes, "Doesn't need to be proof. Don't worry, buddy. I'll be done in a second." I mean, I think he got greedy and overconfident. And like you said, who's going to check my work? Look at all these,
Yeah.
plaques on my wall of all these other front covers I've made.
Just like Dan Rathers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to check me? I'm Dan Rathers, or I'm the number one
Exactly.
reporter. At,
No, he was his editor's trying to get him to do something, and he's too busy drinking beer and playing poker, going, "Oh, I got this. It's no big deal."
Yeah.
Yeah. But he was good at lying because he faked those other guys out with a pair of deuces.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or well, let's roll the next scene, New York Times, because it does show. I said, you said write it up and not make. This is the editor says I said write it up, not make it up, and then he moves to his home in Montana, the snow. So this is probably akin to the picture I saw you post, Eric. Right? He goes from the big city to snow, nobody around, walking to his mailbox is a half a mile from the house to get his copy of the New York Times. I don't know. I guess if I don't know if I would want to get the New York Times. I think I'd probably start reading something else. Reading about the could you imagine that, and reading about the fallout of his false story in the paper in which he was a star. So so here he is. He's about to get shellacked by his editor. And here's the other thing, and it's akin to what's going on today, because it was also, I think we had a lawsuit where George Stephanopoulos accused Trump of being, a really bad person that they knew was false, right?
Yeah.
And he did it right before the election, and Trump sued, and they had to pay out
$40 million.
It was 15. It was 15. It was 10 million for his. Was it? Or it was 14 million for his presidential library, and then 1 million, I think, for attorney's fees.
Right.
And the media's mad that they folded to Trump, but it wasn't defensible what they did. They knew, and they clearly knew, that what he was saying was false, and he said it over and over again. And what Trump said is, "Hey, you did this to impact the election. This is not reporting. This is defamation. This was designed to hurt me," which is one aspect of defamation. And the interesting thing on defamation of a public official, there has to be malicious intent, and there clearly was malicious intent, right? So they did it. And in this case, this is just about greed. I have to agree with you, Eric. I think I said it. Yeah, this is about greed. He got a big head. I'm going to make a next story. I would assume probably his first story, he worked his tail off and got it. But it's easier just to ride on reputation.
Yeah.
And just kind of make it up because nobody's going to check it out. But yeah, and that really kind of brings up, there's got to be a little bit of narcissism in that, right? You get a kind of a big head, got to get a big head. It's okay, I can do this, right? And
now, did he really go to Africa? He could have got all that information off of Wikipedia and wrote it up. It's his ego.
He went to Africa. It was a free trip.
Huge ego.
Karen Bass went to Africa. It was a free trip. Let's go.
But just in Moneyball, in Moneyball, the same actor had the same huge ego about the numbers and everything. And in this show here, or this movie here, Mike Finkel, he had a huge ego. So
yeah, here he is. It's what they can do. Yeah, and this is kind of brings up, it's what they can do to you with your pen. Now, this is, it's kind of a harmless story, and he's telling a story of slavery in Africa. Meaning, when I say harmless, I mean he didn't go out of his way to hurt anybody. And I'm bringing up examples where reporters actually reject their ethics to hurt people. Mm-hmm. He didn't really hurt anybody, and probably did. But in the end, the editor says, "Well, because you lied about the story, these people who were depending on the goodwill from the story to get money now don't know what to believe," right? So there is a little bit of fallout of that, because she does bring that up. Although I have a hard time seeing mainstream media as being altruistic about anything, right? I'm jaded, I guess. I don't know. What do you think, Danny? Am I onto something? I'm a little jaded. I don't think they really care about anything other than themselves, but that's just me.
Well, this was back 30 years ago, so it may have been a little bit more honest. Not much, but a little bit. Their bottom line is newspaper sales and money, and it's with newspapers. A very good friend of mine that I grew up with worked for a large newspaper in Orange County, and he always said it's not about the content, it's about paper sales and getting
Yeah,
them out there.
yeah,
Well, then
exactly.
I honestly believe nowadays it's not about. I went to journalism. I got a journalism degree. It's all about the looks. It's like he looks good. She looks good on camera.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
look at some of these interviews and some of these reports. Like, why are you talking that way? You don't. They don't do the research. They don't talk. They don't use the correct terminology, and they're just talking heads. They're reading off of the phone, and they're
Hey,
just look pretty. You know.
Eric, I do my own commentary, and I have a voice, for radio, and a face for print. I recognize that. I don't think I'm going to ever be invited to comment regularly on Fox News. Right? I just don't have the hair. I don't have the looks, and I wear glasses. God forbid.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with glasses, right, Danny? But
it
I'm just
goes-
not going to get that invitation, right?
It
I mean, I
goes
look at the
back
news
to
and it's all these beautiful people. And I'm thinking, God, these guys spent 30 years grinding it out in public policy and reading. No, they're not. It's fed to them. So I guess I'm
the only
agreeing
guy
with
that
you,
gets
Eric.
on Fox News that's ugly is Tom Homan. But he's
Yeah,
old
but I
and
love
bald.
him. Don't you love him?
Yeah, we love him. But this goes back to your Mike was talking about journalism degrees. Is how Marco Rubio schooled the reporter for I forgot what station she was from or network she was from, but it was like this lady had no clue about anything in history. You went to college, you got a degree, you're stupid. I mean, that's all I can say about it is you're freaking stupid.
They lack common sense.
Yeah.
They lack common sense, and they think that their pretty face is going to say it all without, like I said, without doing research and knowing their subject. I mean, it's crazy. Absolutely.
But they're also speaking to a whole bunch of other people that didn't get. I mean, basically, she was suggesting that Germany, the Weimar Germany, which was the lead up to Hitler and Hitler's Germany, had freer speech than we do. And and Rubio schooled her up, of course. I mean, it isn't just that it's just it's a bold-faced lie. Even you have to know that. I mean, you would think common sense would dictate. I mean, what was Goebbels known for? The minister of propaganda. That's what he was known for. And the fact that they can't even look at this, and it's just shameful. But we have a lot of people go, oh yeah.
That's why my great grandfather and my great grandparents on both of my parents' side left Germany back in the late 1800s, early 1900s because of all the lies and the BS and the political garbage that was happening in Germany, because that all was about the same time it morphed into World War I and then World War II.
Yeah, nationalism, all that stuff. It definitely, and actually, J.D. Vance just spanked Europe, and he went over there and says, "You guys need to. You guys don't have free speech. You guys are suppressing speech. This is not good for a healthy society. We are partners with you because we have common values with you, but we're not seeing that you are continuing to support those same values that we do." And they were really upset.
That's happening in Canada as well.
I know. Yeah, it is. I don't know if you guys ever followed the guy Jordan Peterson, but that was he said. It's not that I don't have a problem using pronouns, because it was the whole pronouns thing, but the law is if I don't use it, that I could be fined.
Right.
You're compelling speech. That is, when you start doing that, you lose. That is not free speech. And so, and that's what really brought him that was his claim to fame, and then he went into a lot of different areas. Brilliant guy. Let's roll the next scene, meeting, first impressions. And now our guy Finkel has been fired. He's struggling to find new relevancy and work. He's off in Montana. And Longo here is in prison, and he had taken Finkel's name, and Finkel saw this as an opportunity. Let me go. Oh, yeah. He gets called from a reporter. He doesn't know about it. He immediately checks on it, and he's looking for a way to claw himself back to relevancy. And he immediately sees this as an interesting story that came to him. It came to him by this guy taking his name, Family Annihilator taking him, and he is going to capitalize on this. And I see that immediately. And to some degree, I don't have a problem with it. If he tells the story straight, I guess I don't have a problem with that, right? Okay, it came to me. I didn't compel this, right? And then these first impressions, they meet each other and they have these first impressions. And I think obviously Longo is going to use him and he wants to use Longo. And I think they pretty much know that in each other right away. Right. So what do you think of this exchange, Eric? These first impressions?
It was interesting, but because you could tell right away, like you said, what Longo had in mind, what he wanted. And then the reporter, he just saw this, like you said, as an opportunity to regain his reputation back, but also make some money off of it, whichever way that was going to be, whether it be articles or like this ended up being as a book. But he just saw redemption in what was going to happen.
And I'm sure he thought, well, I could tell just a straight story, and then people will, I can rebuild my credibility, right? And Danny, so this is what our killer says. Longo says to Finkel, he says, "I have all the papers chasing me, so I have something of value to give to you. What are you going to give to me?" And then they get into this transactional relationship, and even though he's killed his family, he's lower than pond scum, at least in our eyes, and he still sees himself as somebody of value and worth, which is shocking to me. This is a man who has no conscience, right? And he's looking, how can I exploit my story to my, because nobody wants to have anything to do with me. I'm going to manipulate this guy here, and he does. But the mere fact that you wiped out your family, including a 3-year-old, puts the 3-year-old still alive in a suitcase, throws her in the water. I mean, this is a despicable guy, but he sees himself as, I'm a prize right now. I kind of came away with that. What do you think of that?
Yeah, that is true. His narcissism is just, I mean, he's hitting 100% right now. In Nutville, he thinks he wants to make himself someone like Ted Bundy or some of the really notable BTK guys, really notable serial killers or murderers, and so he's trying to inflate himself up there to that. But at the same time, he sees that Mike Finkel, who's been fired from the New York Times, and it depicted this in the movie, how he was trying to get jobs with any little newspaper or anything like that, and everybody was turning him down. So he obviously knew Finkel's story, and he goes, "I'm going to give you this opportunity to make me famous and to rebuild your career, because I need you, or you need me as much as I need you." And he played Finkel throughout the whole movie. He was playing Finkel, and I think near the end, Mike finally figured it out that he was being played. But
yeah,
I think he kind of knew all along, but I think he felt he had the superior position.
Yeah,
he's smart. I'm smarter than this guy, and I have to tell you, people with behavior disorders, a lot of these come from childhood, and they're well practiced.
Yeah,
in these things for a lifetime. I mean, they're starting this at 3, 4, 5 years old, because it's childhood trauma that causes a lot of this stuff, right? And this, most people, they don't see it coming when they get up in a relationship or a friendship with somebody who has some kind of behavioral disorder, and this one being narcissism. They don't realize the depth of the manipulation, particularly with sophisticated, because most of them are pretty sophisticated. They've been doing it for decades by this. The guy's probably in his 30s. He'd been doing it for a couple decades at least, right? What do you think, Eric? Same thing. That happens.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I'm just reading the words on it, and it's like you said, Longo knew exactly what he wanted, and he knew what Finkel was going to do. And like you said, they were playing each other.
Yeah.
But I think Finkel, like you said, towards the end, he figured it out, and he didn't get exact outcome that he was hoping for, and even the publisher, it wasn't what the expectations weren't met. I don't believe what the publisher wanted, but it was a very interesting relationship that they had going. They both had in their own minds what they wanted out of it, but at the same time, they knew how it was going to end up.
He keeps Finkel keeps asking questions. Did you do it? And Longo keeps playing games, and that's one of the things, they have a hard time acknowledging what they did. Right? These narcissists, because they, and he plays them along. I wrote a quote down. I could not give them what they deserved. and then so in my parentheses, so I killed him. Really, he didn't say that, but that's, I mean, that fits with List. That fits with other, the Lakewood story you told.
Mhm.
Executive loses his job. I can't give them what they deserve. I'm failed. So the easy way out for them and me is I wipe them all out. And
Yeah.
at least he had the courtesy of killing himself. But these narcissists, they can't always do that, right? And
Mhm.
but yeah, I think Longo thinks I got this is a lifeline for him for relevancy, right? Because narcissists, they got to have that. They need to have somebody. But here's the thing, Danny. I felt that Finkel was ignoring a lot of the elephant in the room to some degree. Eventually he kept ignoring the fact that this guy is a cold-blooded killer. That, to me, that's how it felt. He couldn't acknowledge it. I think later on in the movie, his wife jams him up. Did he kill? And he couldn't say it. And I don't know what he expected to come out of this, but it's pretty clear. He had motive. He had opportunity. He did it. I mean, come on, what's that?
Well,
Man, that's basic for us. Who else would do it? I mean, come on.
That's because Finkel was a liberal reporter for the New York Times, and so he grew up in, his career. He grew up in that type of liberalism, and so you give everybody the benefit of the doubt. I'm watching this and looking at it from an investigator's side. I go, dude, ask this question, ask that question.
Yeah.
And he's kind of like beating around the bush to get the information and just go for it. Just do it. And don't sit there and I mean, there's so many different interview techniques he could have used to get the story, and he's just like playing the liberal blah 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 type of thing.
He wanted to string this. I think he wanted to string the story out for as much as he could get. So he wanted this relationship to happen because he knew. But okay, let's get to your investigator roots here. You sat across sociopaths. You sat across people who were manipulated their whole life. You're looking at this interview. This is Tuesday for you, right? This is typical.
Yeah.
Seeing these people with behavior disorders, because you're dealing with people who have lived tough lives and then they go on to become gang members and killers and do whatever, right? This is just Tuesday for him. Finkel, this is something new. You kind of agree with that?
In a sense, because when he was all the other interviews he always did, at least from the African story, was he was trying to get these guys' story. He didn't go in there, and he at first it seemed like he was scared to go in to the jail. He kind of got, I'm going to be in there by myself, kind of like thing. Yeah. And the jail guys go, yeah, we're going to be right outside and everything. Yeah. But once he got in there, he was kind of like, I'm in a place I don't want to be. And then, so he was he was out of his comfort zone where the bad guy was in his comfort zone because he's been in jail for a couple of days or months. And so Finkel had to, he just beat around the bush. He didn't kind of go for it. He was scared, I guess would be a good word to say, when he first got in there. Once he strung it along because he was feeling more comfortable. Yeah. And so the meet and greet would have been great. Just go in and say, hi, what do you want from me? And what do I want from you? And then set up another appointment, because it was only 15 minutes the first time. Set up another visit.
I think the other part was, why me? Why'd you take my name?
Yeah.
That was the other part that had to come out. And which is what linked them, right? That's what linked them. Okay. I got to ask you something, Eric. This is the cleanest freaking jail I've ever seen in my life, right? Do you remember they're walking in this thing? It's nice and bright. It's clean. I go, what jail is this?
Exactly. Oh, yeah. There's no graffiti on the walls. There's no food splattered on the walls. There's no etching on the tables. Oh yeah, absolutely.
No other inmates around either. I mean,
exactly.
Where are all the people? I mean, there's just only one guy in this jail, and everything's white and light. And I'm like, this is,
There's no John Wayne mural in the background.
Yeah, well, because you want industrial gray, you want things that calm people down. You don't want bright, light, whatever, and I'm thinking, where is this place? This is unrealistic. I've never seen a jail like this. No. Even some of the newer jails. I remember I toured a new jail complex down in San Diego, which was just a couple years old, and it was nice, but it wasn't this. So Interesting though. The things you observe, when you're a cop or somebody working correction, and then you watch the movie, go, where the hell is this at? And so I'm curious, is it a real jail? And did they manufacture?
They may have manufactured it, but one thing I noticed in a lot of movies where you see jails and everything like that, they're using regular keys. These guys were using Folger Atom keys.
Yeah.
The same keys that you use in a real jail. And Pat, you've never been to Lomita Station because their jail is painted.
Oh, we lost Danny.
Uh-oh.
Their jail is perfect. All right, Danny, you're gonna have to
reality versus perception.
Yes.
You lost me.
Yeah, I lost you. You're frozen there. Can you hear me?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So Lomita's jail is what?
It was painted in pastel colors.
Well, who did that?
That's how it went when it was built. That's what it called for back when I think it was built in like 77, whenever they broke away from Lennox.
So no offense to the guys in Lomita, but I rode there once. You know how in the academy you had to go ride places, and I was
the real academy.
Yeah. And so you the second half of the academy, you got partnered with people, and Lomita was one of the places I went to. I grew up in the city of Detroit, right? And so I go to a place like Lomita, and I was like, oh my God, this is a killer. I hate it. It was so slow. It was so slow. I go, I just couldn't. What's it like? The really exclusive Rolling Hills or something is adjacent to it. I can't remember now, but I can't work here. There's no way I can work here. And I wasn't one of those guys who needed to go work the fastest place. I mean, I grew up in Detroit. I really didn't care to work, the worst places that LA County had to offer. I grew up in it. I didn't need to, but I didn't want to work there. It was just way too slow for me. So I don't know what you guys think.
I would work overtime at Lomita on earlies when I worked Carson. And there was one time riding with a partner, and he goes, you know what? He goes, if we don't get a call tonight, it'll be 2 weeks in a row I haven't handled a radio call at all.
Huh?
It's a little tiring there. When I went to patrol, and I assume it was probably the same with you, you go into jail, you get 6 picks of stations. My number one pick was Carson.
Oh, really?
And my last pick was Lomita.
Yeah.
And I spent 2 years there, and then I couldn't wait to get to East LA. Couldn't get there fast enough.
Well, I when I went from Carson, I went to Crescenta Valley, but and it's a little. It was at the time Crescenta Valley was attached to Altadena, so they had some activity going on, but that was really slow for my blood too. But I was finishing my degree, so I wanted to be closer to Cal State Northridge, where I was going to, and my family. So I had a plan, but and then they gave me a really busy job. I did search and rescue and disaster preparedness. So otherwise I had to leave. I go, okay, I can't.
You had Pasadena, Denver Lane gangs up there in Altadena, North Pasadena.
But it still wasn't. It still was really. I mean, come on. I was registered for 2 classes. This is I was finishing my senior year, right? And I go and I work there, and I work Altadena, and I go right in the registrar's office. I said, give me 2 more classes. And so I took a full boat while working there because it was so slow. I had time to kill. Let's say, hey, Camp Can, hey, gents, this one I haven't run across. Interested to hear about it. When we're talking about it, and let me give a couple terms for you, Camp Can. Family annihilator, because you can look up the stories too. Chris Lango, I say he's a family annihilator. And then we got the disgraced New York Times reporter, and it's a true story. And they come together to benefit from each other, I guess, is probably the best way to say it. And I do think ultimately I didn't check on Finkel to see how far his career went. But let's try and do one more. Well, wait a minute. Do we have time? Let's see. Yeah, you know what? I don't think we have time for another scene. Martine, are you queued up? Are you ready for our mid-show break?
Yes, I am.
All right. Well, let's roll. We got about 2 minutes, guys. I'll see you in 2 minutes.
Sounds good.
There's only one location on the internet where you can get it all: movie, TV, and comic industry. news and rumor analysis, official scoops from Geekosity magazine, reviews, and interviews. So, when you need it to be Sunday, there's only one place to go, mate. Pop Culture Minefield, where they're always talking nerdy nerd stuff. Right, jog on then. There's only one location on the internet where you can get it all. Movie, TV, and comic industry. News and rumor analysis. Official scoops from Geekosity magazine. Reviews. And interviews. So, when you need it to be Sunday, there's only one place to go, mate. Pop Culture Minefield, where they're always talking nerdy nerd stuff. Right, jog on then.
Welcome back to Morning Coffee with the Chief, and thank you for joining us. I just want to, can you hear us? Yeah, I just want to let folks know I am trying to look at different, more interesting movies. I mean, not more interesting movies, but just ones that maybe people wouldn't look at. I think we did Clove Hitch Killer a little while ago. That one was off of Netflix. And then, it's just some interesting stuff. And this one I think is interesting because of the real life killer of his family and the real life disgraced New York Times reporter. I guess they're all disgraced these days, right? So how do you set them apart, right? And so disgraced back in 2000, I think 13, when he wrote some false articles and how they came together and their relationship. But let's roll the scene Wrong Turns, because as he's talking to Longo over a period of time, he starts talking about how his life takes wrong turns, right? I think they moved from Utah to, I think it was Oregon, and he can't get a job, gets a job as barista, and they make decisions on purchases that hurt them. So he sees life as a series of wrong turns, and I only wanted what was best for them, was a quote that he said. That's what he said he wanted for his family. I only wanted, and now, we're all dads, right? I only want what's best for him means go get a second job. I remember telling some folks, well, how do I get promoted? How do I do this? I said, well, make sure that you're, you add to the mission every day, figure out what the boss wants, and figuring out what the boss wants and making sure you do it isn't sucking up. That's just called the job. And then executing every day. And when you do that, the boss is going to figure out and you're successful. Most dads figure that one out and do it, right? That's Longo, because he has such an inflated opinion of himself. I think he loses. He doesn't understand that, right? Things are supposed to happen for him because he's great. But we all realize that doesn't happen. You got to grind it out. That's what a real dad does. But it's interesting that he makes this comment, the old Chris Longo is dead. I think he kind of says it, but I only wanted what was best for them, and then he ultimately kills them, right? So come on, Danny, let's. What is a dad? This is not a dad, right? This is a psychopath, right?
He's a nutcase, big time nutcase, with like all the other movies you have me watch. We're dealing with nuts.
He's a dad in name only, but he certainly is a father. Doesn't feel this way about his kids. He doesn't.
You get back to the employer, the boss, and the employee thing. And a good employee, or at least in my opinion, will do exactly what you said, do what the boss wants and do what the boss says. But a good employee will also make the boss look good.
Mhm.
And if you do that throughout your career, you're going to be somewhat successful.
Yeah.
But and when I was growing up, my dad, he had 4 boys, and my second oldest brother, me, and my younger brother, we all became Eagle Scouts. And we all got into scouting at a young age because that's my dad. He recognized that we need to get into something to keep us out of trouble.
Yeah.
4 boys in Orange County could be dangerous. And that's what he did. He got us into scouting, and he was our leader. So not only did he recognize that we needed some good leadership, he took the role as the leader. And that's where Chris Longo fails, is he didn't take a leadership role. And that's what a good father, a good parent does, is he takes the leadership role of his family and leads them. Instead, he's a loser. And he even admitted at one point, I believe, that I'm a loser. And he just never had, like you said, his ego was so inflated. He never had took the opportunity to be a true leader. Instead, he just got a menial job at Starbucks, and he couldn't even make enough money to support his family. So
I think when he says the comment, I call this scene the wrong turns, because he talks about it's just a series of wrong turns. Like life is happening to him, and as you, Danny, you talk about take control, right? Life is happening to him. It's just happening to me. These are a series of wrong turns, Eric, right? But what is that? Good people make their own luck. That's a saying, right?
Yep.
Good people make their own luck. And he's saying, this is just a series of bad luck. These things just happen, right? Even when you talk about the example of the Lakewood guy who was caught hoofering, I think you said, stealing, and he lost his job.
Mhm.
That didn't just happen to him. He did it, right? So,
Right.
and these are a series of decisions that he makes. And as we now know, he did it as the lead of the family, and where his wife was supposed to unquestioningly follow his lead, right?
Mhm.
And he so these series of wrong turns all rest upon him. He's the one who's driving the car, although he acts like these are just things that happen to him. What do you think of that, Eric? That's woe is me. It's not me. It's everybody else.
Exactly. I think it goes back to society nowadays, is that people are quick to blame others for their unfortunate turn of events. This is a perfect example of it. I was born and raised in Mexico. I mean, we moved from home to home because we got evicted all the time. So I had that upbringing that you see nowadays, but I learned very, very young, is that if I'm going to make it, I'm going to make it. No one's going to do it for me. Everybody is, with a few exceptions, percentages, everybody has the same deck of cards, and it's how you play those hands will decide how your life turns out. To me, it sounds like he did not have a strong father figure. He didn't have somebody to guide him as a child or as a teenager and tell him, this is what you do as a man when you grow up. This is your responsibilities to do. It's more like, I'm going to wing it, and and do whatever I want. And if something happens, I'll figure it out when I get there. And, marriage happens, babies happen. And by then it's too late to figure out how to live life at that point. And like you said, I think he got pushed in the corner and being a narcissist. And this is the only way it's going to happen. He did not want to accept responsibilities for his misfortunes or his failures in life, and unfortunately it included his wife and children.
Yeah, one of these things with these family annihilators is the shame of failure.
Mm-hmm.
The shame of failure, because you hear it in him. The shame of failure. I don't want them to go through the pain of the shame of failure. The guy from Lakewood that you talked about, the shame of failure with his family. John List, the example I brought up, the shame that brought to him and his family. They didn't want them to feel that pain,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of the sense I see here. Hey, thank you, Camp Kim. Yeah, it is. This is actually pretty dark, this whole story, when you do think about it. But it's the other interesting thing is they can't admit their shame, right? They can't acknowledge it. Because
Mhm.
I was thinking, oh, come on, man, we have these safety nets. I mean, are you getting food stamps? Are you getting all the stuff? Are you getting welfare? I mean, did they do that? Because they don't really delve into that. But they're really we do have. I know we talk about basic income as what we should have in the United States. I don't necessarily agree with that, but we essentially do have safety nets so that people get shelter, some basic shelter, some food, particularly families who are seeking it out.
Yeah.
There are opportunities, right, Danny? But pride is a big part of being a narcissist, right? And they can't do it. They can't admit they're the failure. If I had go for help, I'm the failure, right?
Even when he's testifying about what happened, he's telling the jury what happened. It's
Yeah.
all about him. He never really admitted why he did it, or it was all about him. I walked in and she was distraught. Baby was it was all about him.
Yeah, he blamed it on her, is what he started to do.
On
He
her.
had to shift it. He blamed it on her. And the interesting thing about that is, well, obviously the evidence was pretty clear as you get into this that
Yeah.
all the evidence is pointing to him. It isn't her, and but he can't accept blame, or at least not at that point. He couldn't accept
Mhm.
blame. I don't know, I don't think they ever fully do. This was the right thing to do because I was going through so much pain, and they were going to go through so much pain. Danny, are you still with us? And you just cut off your picture?
I'm still here, and I got a notice that my browser lost connection to my camera, so I'm going to take a minute to get that hooked back up, and so keep on talking. I'll be right back.
Okay, so the voice from on high is still with us. So okay, let's let me see what I make sure I got some notes here. I would never. Oh yeah, and I think he said that they would never lie to one another. Him and his wife. Somehow I don't believe that's true.
No.
I think she probably didn't lie to him, but I have a feeling he lied a lot to her, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
she just put up with it, right?
Yeah.
Because she was in one of those thou shall not thy shall, and I also wrote cleanest jail in the world ever,
Yeah.
and it probably is a jail somewhere, but I wonder if they did a little bit of Hollywood stuff where they brightened it up just to give you that stark kind of picture.
Yeah.
They had to, because there's no way they're keeping it that clean. Here I am back on that.
It was a brand new jail. That was the first time anybody had ever been in it. Other than
Yeah, and he's the only prisoner in it, right? Yeah. So, okay, so they never lied to each other, Danny. I brought this with Eric. That's what he said about him and his wife, and somehow I don't believe that. I think he probably lied to her all the time, but maybe she was honest with him. I don't know, because you can't admit you're a failure, right? You have a hard time. It's easy once you killed 4 people. It's easier to say, yeah, I kind of screwed up there. But when you're right in the midst of life, he couldn't admit it. Narcissists have a time admitting that they're wrong.
He wouldn't admit that he was wrong to his wife. He wouldn't admit. It took the longest time for him to. I mean, who pleads guilty to 2 murders and not guilty to 2 murders of the same family? How do you do that?
And that was interesting.
He didn't have, unlike Big Balls, he didn't have the balls to sit there and admit that he was wrong.
If that was his attorney strategy, I don't know. I don't think I'd want to get that attorney.
Yeah.
Even the judge said it straight on. Says the only reason you did that is to confuse a jury. And
Yeah. Well, let's roll. One of the things building tension, and this is kind of so you got a true story. So this is a little question on Hollywood. You got a true story. So you watched it. You watched with your wife, Danny. How do you build that tension? Right? Did you see this techniques they're using? They're just flashbacks to each other. She's typing on, or she's playing the piano. He's typing on his computer, and they're kind of flashbacks. So they're trying to build this tension that this is impacting the family, right?
Yeah.
And so how do you do that? And it doesn't look like they had arguments and fights, so they had to build this tension this cinematic way by just showing her looking up some stuff regarding family killers and some of the things that she is, and they're just trying to portray the building of tension between the two in the story, which okay, I had to address this whole Hollywood. How do you do this? They use music. They use snapshots of scenes. What did you think? What did you think of the scene?
I think the cinematography on this movie was excellent. The way they did B-roll, the way they did use the music, you could tell that the tension. It actually started when he got back to Montana, And Jill, his wife or girlfriend, she goes, well, I'm going to ask the university for more pay. That and he goes, well, I can go look for a job. And she goes, I'll take care of it. And that's where it started. And then when she walked into the house, and he had the pictures. He did a classic Joseph Wambaugh, or something that a lot of authors do, is they'll take all their notes and plant them up on the wall and paste them around. So that's your storyboard. And when you're seeing those very dark pictures, that just like got her brain really spinning. It goes, something's going on here. And she started reading some stuff. She goes, holy crap, that's when she started researching it. And in the meantime, he's running back and forth, 5 miles in the snow uphill both ways to get the mail.
Well, you can't. It's probably you would have. Hey, so Danny, do me a favor. Shut off your camera and just stick with us with voice, because you're rubber banding. You're breaking in and out. If you can shut off your camera, we'll just go with voice. You'll be more marketable when we can't see you too. So I just. Okay, so building tension. Same question to you, Eric. So building tension, I would imagine if they wanted to show the storyline of building tension between these two folks, it's another 45 minutes of the movie, right? And they didn't want to spend that, so they chose another way to do it, right? And that's what I kind of saw on this. I mean, what'd you think?
Honestly, I the way they did it, and I think Danny is correct. It was really well. I for sure thought that by the end of the story, she would have left him. I had already figured out that by her walking into this room and looking at the storybook and looking at similarities of his writings to her husband or her boyfriend's writings, she figured out that he was a mass murderer. He had already done it, And Finkel, I really think that he was hoping, like he told the editors or that he was innocent, because the editors even told him, you told us he was, you believed he was innocent, and that's what we wanted, to be accused of being a mass murderer. It turns out he was innocent. That was a story, and it turns out it wasn't. But as we all find out at the end, they eventually, whether they got married and had 3 kids and still living in Montana. But they did a really good job of showing that tension between them during that time, and how much time this case was taken away from his relationship with her. So,
well, I think this has to be his lifeline too. And he's under tension because this is his lifeline, and it's not kind of going the way he thinks it's going to go. Right. But there was a time during this when you realize, she's his biggest fan.
Mm-hmm.
His wife, his girlfriend, or future wife, his girlfriend is his biggest fan.
Mm-hmm.
And she asked him, "Do you think he did it?" And he couldn't say yes. And that's when I think the fan base there got a little jaded. That's what I think. You can see that in her. She can see the obvious. She could do her own research. Mm-hmm. This guy's a family annihilator. He killed his entire family. He drowned his 3-year-old. There's nothing redeeming about him. Tell the story, and say the truth. Don't dance around this. And I think that when he couldn't say, yeah, he wiped out his family.
Yeah,
you could see that she was very disappointed in him. That's what I saw, right?
Well, but he had promised the publisher that he was innocent. That's the way the story was going to go. So it was going to ruin the outcome of the book.
Right. And well, he still sold his book though. He still sold it. Different story. He spun it, right? Interesting. So what salvaged the book and the story was just telling the truth.
Yeah, exactly.
They should just tell what I got manipulated by this guy. But hey, same thing to you, Danny. So his wife asked him, did he do it? And he couldn't say the obvious. Yes.
Throughout the whole movie, he just wouldn't answer, wouldn't man up to it, and that was what was wild. He didn't deny it, but he wouldn't say to the positive or the affirmative. So it was
it's like Longo, like the killer. He couldn't say it.
Yeah,
and Finkel couldn't say it, which is is wild to
And-
me. I mean, come on, look at the evidence. I mean, what are you talking about here? And he couldn't bring himself to say it, and maybe because he wanted that, he had to believe in the mystery because he had to believe in the story. He needed to believe in it to write the story, and to make it more interesting, I guess. But for his editors, but he lost something from his girlfriend there a little bit. She lost, she was less enamored with him after that
Yeah.
exchange, is what I saw.
Yeah.
All right, here comes the one we kind of already touched on it, and this is the plea hearing, and this is when he did this and he went in and we kind of talked about it. He goes in, and what's he going to do? And he's obviously, I think our reporter Finkel's thinking he's going to, plead innocent, right? So everything, but then he splits the baby, so to speak. He pleads guilty to 2, but not 2 others, which is okay. You already, acknowledging that you killed one of the kids, but not the other 2, doesn't make you a better. You're still a child killer, right? I mean, I it's like, okay, it's, she killed the kids and I killed her. I mean, all right, there's a lie, but yeah, I killed her and killed one of the kids, and it's like, okay, well, he's toast. I didn't understand the fallout of that as to how he was going to wiggle out of anything, maybe because I thought, well, they get to now say that. I think when he goes to court, they get to say that he acknowledged killing 2 of them, right? I don't see how it helps with the other 2, but but it does throw Mr. Finkel in a quandary because he's now admitted to killing 2. He's kind of sold the notion that there's more to the story to the editors, and there isn't more to the story. This is, I don't want to say this is a garden variety person who wipes out his whole family, because it's frequent enough that it's not unusual, but it doesn't happen that often, right? But you look at the evidence, clearly he did it, but he kind of sold that there's something else there, and there's not something else there. This is just a cold, calculating, narcissistic husband and father who chose the easy way out and killed his family and ran to Mexico, hoping to, I guess, to get away with it. That's the other thing. They think they can get away with this stuff. And that's who he is, and that's what it ended up being. So here's him taking his plea. So what did you think of the plea there, Eric?
I not looking back at it, it's almost like he was playing the court, trying to get some mileage out of his case. He knew obviously that he was guilty, and I think just like when suspects get in a pursuit, they want their 15 minutes of fame as they're being chased. I think that's what it was personally, is that he was playing the system, playing the emotions of everybody. And he even said it when he got convicted. He goes, obviously it worked out because I've already gotten 3 marriage proposals, from outside the jail, So, I mean, he knew what was going to happen. He was just trying to draw it out, So, yeah, but interesting. Like I said, if I had that attorney, I'd think twice about if that was a strategy from his attorneys. I don't know, man. They were really reaching deep down into that rabbit hole to figure something out. So,
well, how do you do that, Danny? How do you do that? All the cards are stacked against you. All the evidence is pointing your direction, and you're really facing. I just go down fighting, right? Or I just take the plea, right? And in this case, he does something pretty confusing. I didn't see legally how it was really going to impact when he goes to trial in the other 2 cases, but your thoughts on it.
Yeah, and one of the interviews Frankel did with him, he says, "Yeah, I'm just going to take the plea because that would be the right thing to do, or that would be something." And then he gets to court, and I'm still like, how do you plead guilty to 2 murders? But then the story behind that is, well, I didn't kill the first 2 kids. My wife did. I just killed her and my other baby. Yeah. And that, and just sitting there shaking my head. What?
Yeah.
And I kind of agree. I kind of
trying
agree
to
with
control the narrative, right? He's just trying to control the narrative, and
50% guilty.
Yeah. Well, the other thing here is that even in the movie, it just said this is going to be on nationwide news outlets. Well, when you get on TV, and the LA market, since I've been on TV several times, your ego just like your head just like balloons way up,
Right.
compared to when I did a news interview when I worked Lancaster station. It was like, oh, this is just Lancaster news, Jones Intercable News. You know, it was no big deal. But I got interviewed down in LA a couple of times, and it's like, wow. So this guy, his story's going nationwide. So now he's going to, like, everybody's going to know about this story and what I did, and this is what I want. And let's make this a worldwide story. Why don't you? And let everybody know that I'm a mass murderer, so because it builds up my ego.
Well, that's what narcissists want. They feed off that, right? It's
Yeah,
like oxygen.
exactly.
The attention is like oxygen to them, right? And he's getting a lot of it, not only from Finkel, but now all these other news people, you know, as what 3 marriage proposals as you talk about. So he's getting all this attention, you know, for the rest of the world would say for despicable reasons. But, you know, attention is attention for a narcissist, right?
And he shows no remorse.
Yeah.
None.
Yeah.
He's blaming his wife. You know, and he even states, you know, he killed him for a reason. I had to kill him. You know, she was still breathing. So what am I going to do? She can't live like that without her mother and her siblings. So I had to put her out of her misery, talking about her daughter. And then, you know, I accidentally killed my wife. No, you did. It was interesting. Very interesting.
Well, he learns that this is a good part too, but he learns that, you know, obviously our reporter learns that he's getting played, right? Or our news guys learns that he's getting played this whole time. And now suddenly his story is way different than he expected, right? And he did tease him. There's something to the story. Somebody else kind of did this. He's inferring, meaning Longo is inferring that there's something else behind this or somebody else behind this. And of course, there is nobody else behind us. And you know, it's just wishful thinking on his part, but here's a big part of this because they do talk about it. I wrote some notes. This book is the most important. In the end, he screwed over the writer, meaning, and the comment is, I can't help you. So this was important. This was Finkel's road back, this interesting story, and then it turns out to be not all that interesting. It's just this, I don't want to say garden variety family killer because it's not. But he's just a killer. He's just a manipulative killer, and he sucked this guy in.
I wonder if Longo's told him that, as far as saying there's more to it than what you think, that I can say right now, just to string Finkel along.
Oh, yeah.
Finkel was losing interest in the whole story. Like, hey, stick around. There's more to this than you really know.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't tell him. So
he had to have him coming back, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, once Finkel realized that he's guilty, and my story's gonna go down the toilet. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know what was interesting is because we're on that scene right now where he's talking to the state investigator, Finkel is.
Yeah.
Isn't there some kind of almost like a newspaper privilege for reporters, so they don't have to testify? And then the other one is. Chris Longo, it was obvious that he made several phone calls to Finkel's household, or to that house, because he called his wife and called Jill and knew her by name and everything. And it's like, well, the state investigator really wouldn't have to go too far to get knowledge, because all of the phone calls are, even back then, the phone calls were tape recorded.
Yeah, they're recorded.
And
but how much did he say in the room? I think that's what he wanted. And I don't know how much of this is, you know, obviously he's feeling guilty, Finkel, because he's getting played, and he could help put this guy in prison. Of course, what little credibility you have in the whole journalistic world would go away if he testified against, you know, a source, because in the end, Longo is a source for him, right? That, I mean, and I think we didn't talk about it, but I think, it comes up a little bit later, but yeah, this is still the road back for Finkel. Yeah. This is still the road back for, and really, I think what he's scrambling is, how do I repair this? How do I do this?
I think if he decided to help the prosecution, he would lose substance to his story. It would all come out. So I think that's another thing. It's like, why should I'm going to lose what I'm trying to gain here by giving you all the information that I'm gathering from my book.
Yeah.
So,
I think the only thing that is, and here I don't want to speak up for a reporter, but the only thing that gives him a little out on that is he was picked because Longo used his name. He
yeah.
got inserted into the story. He's part of the story from the
Mhm.
very beginning, or
Yeah.
at least shortly after the murder, because this guy took his name. And I think that does give him a little bit of opening, where this isn't just about being a reporter or a journalist, because I'm actually part of the story.
Right.
I mean, is that fair? I mean, you kind of agree with that, Eric?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was
Dan, you
sucked
kind
into it, not by choice.
Yeah, Danny, same thing. We'll give a little bit of sympathetic pause to the reporter, right? He was pulled into the story. He didn't latch on. You know what I mean? He was pulled in from the very beginning.
Yeah, he was sucked into it, realized he couldn't, it would be not just a regular, 8 or 10 page article, realized it was going to be a book, but he also had a significant financial gain on this whole
Yeah, $250,000 advance. Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I'd get that for my next book. I think all three I'd split it with you guys if we all collaborated together.
Yeah, if you get a lead off this show, let me know, okay? And
yeah, it was crazy, but he had that financial gain too, and they alluded to it at the beginning when he went back up to Montana that there was some financial problems in his household because his wife Jill wanted to get more hours or more pay raise or something.
Mm-hmm.
And plus he's spending money going back and driving halfway across Oregon or wherever from Montana to Oregon for to interview this guy. So he had a financial gain that he had to also protect and look forward to. And when he started to see it going down the toilet by, hey, this guy's really guilty, and he's not guilty,
Yeah.
He had to do something.
A friend of my wife's is a bona fide author, and what I mean by that is a book writer is she gets significant advances to write books, and one of her books was about the guy who started Fox Studios, and she just completed a book, and she's on a book tour, and it's about a business school that opened up that gave women opportunities in business. I think it was back in the 1920s or something. No, she interviewed people, so it would have been later than that. But yeah, it just and she gets significant advances and lives off those advances while she writes her book. So that does happen, Danny. You can just keep plugging away at it. You'll get there sooner or later.
Right? Did his book get on the New York Times bestseller list?
Oh, did it?
I don't know.
That would be interesting. I'd have to look. Well, they made it into a movie, and the movie was well received. I want to say I have to look. Was it nominated for an Oscar? I can't remember now. But it did get positive feedback. I mean, it got the Danny Coon 2 thumbs up. He said he would go pay for it, so that's a 2 thumbs up, right? And reception. Let's see, nominated. Well, Teen's Choice Award. Okay, well, I don't think I know that. But it did positive reception. So
let's see here.
I don't know. I enjoyed the movie. And I liked it because it was a true story, but it was still an interesting story. And maybe that's the credit to his writing. I don't know. But let's roll the next scene, and this is manipulating the wife, because you kind of talked about this, and for me it was how much did Franco have to give of him? Of Finkel. The writer have to give up himself to Chris Longo to get his story, because he ends up, our killer ends up calling his wife and talking to his wife about things that were shared with him, I guess it was his girlfriend at the time, shared with him by Finkel, right? I mean, and of course she's shocked. Why are you talking to this killer about me, right? And I mean, you can give a little bit of yourself, but you don't want to talk about your whole family when you're talking to suspects. I mean, you don't share personal stuff with them. But probably to get the story, he felt he had to do it. Mm-hmm. But the purpose of Longo calling her was to control not only him, meaning the writer, but his wife as well, right? Yep. Did you see that in that? Is that how you saw it, Eric?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And maybe put a little bit of fear in her. Saying, hey, your husband or your boyfriend has been talking, and I know all of this about you. So, but it goes back to being a narcissist, trying to control the entire situation, not just Finkel, but his whole family, his relationship with his partner. Yeah.
And I, I think part of the reminder to her was, I am the most important person in
Yeah.
Mike Finkel's life. I am me.
Yeah.
He shares all this stuff about you with me. I think that was part of it.
Yeah, but that triggered her to go do her own research.
Yeah.
I'm she knew right away as soon as she saw Eric hit the storyboard, as Danny called it, which is true. She already knew he was guilty. I mean, the dynamic and all the drawings, and I mean everything. It was very obvious. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what Finkel expected, because I think any normal well, even him, I think he knew he was guilty. He was hoping for some backstory,
Yeah.
to make his story even more interesting.
Big
Really, the most interesting backstory is he used his name and this relationship between this disgraced New York Times reporter and this killer developed. That was really the story, which is what the book ends up being about, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, this was, I am the most important person in your life. That's what he's saying to her, right, Danny? That's what you see as well?
Yeah. He's to go back. No, it did not make the New York Times bestseller list. It did. It does get 4.3 positive reviews from over 1,000 people on Amazon. So,
Okay.
and it's you can get it on Amazon for I think $13.99. So,
oh, the book. Okay, all right. Yeah, I wonder if the book's as interesting. Given that he's a writer, I'm sure it's pretty good. I'm reading a book right now called was it Unmasked? I'm going to have somebody on my show, and it's about the corruption behind the masking and the COVID vaccine and other stuff. So I'm only a few pages into it, but fortunately it's a quick book because I'm going to do it in a couple weeks. But I have to tell you, with all the stuff coming out, I mean, there's so many. I know it's a little off topic here on the movie. There's so much stuff now that Trump is in office that it's just like, the information's coming out. I got a J6er coming on my show here in tomorrow, as a matter of fact, and then we got all that information about what actually happened there. And this goes back to our credibility of the news media, man. The fact that all that stuff wasn't reported, so that we can just have an opinion that is different than what the Democrats or the left wanted, so we can draw our own conclusion. I don't think any of us think that a lot of what happened on January 6th was right. But we also know that, having handled demonstrations before, it's not all bad either, right? And it got all characterized as being really bad, and so. But anyways, the wife is getting manipulated, and I think the message is to her, and I think it was more to her than to the husband.
Mhm.
He's my guy.
Yeah.
he's my man, and he'll tell me whatever I want him to, yeah. So, all right, let's roll this. Okay, well, we're still in this. So here they are. Now, the next thing we're gonna roll into is about the family, because this was an interesting thing. It never really came up. It was just a few scenes. I don't know, Martine. Is this still the same scene here, or are we rolling into the family scene here pretty soon?
This is the same.
Okay.
Let me.
Yeah, here's the family. Okay.
Yeah.
So
let me run the next one.
What the interesting thing is Longo is looking for his oxygen as the narcissist, and of course Finkel's there, right? And he's waving at him. You've seen it in the previous clip, and you can see the family looking at Finkel, and they know that he's there to make money off this tragedy, and of course that bothers them. It would bother me too. And he finally gets confronted, and which I like this, because I think when reporters ignore the victims, and I think a lot of times, I personally think over the last 10 years, the behavior of the news media in ignoring the plight of victims, crime victims, to push this leftist narrative about the suspects are the victims, because that's been going on since Michael Brown, right? And ignoring the real plight of the victims is despicable. But here in this scene, just a very few scenes, they show the pain of the family and what the family has to go through, having their daughter and or sister and these young kids all wiped out. And he's faced with that. Finally, Finkel, the reporter, is faced with that. And maybe before they were just abstract. They were just a story. Now they're real.
Yeah.
With the family, they're real, right?
Mhm.
And we see that all the time in law enforcement. We're the ones that do the death notifications. We're the ones who understand. Here's a picture of him, getting tossing one of the kids off the bridge. I think this is the 3-year-old. And that was a pretty powerful opening scene. You remember the opening scene?
Yep.
They got the little 3-year-old in the suitcase. He puts the teddy bear in there. He talks about, I put all their favorite things in there. Like somehow that makes it better.
Right.
Oh, it's because the suitcase was too big.
Oh, is that right? So he had to put it in
Yeah,
to stuff it in?
He put all the other stuff in there because the suitcase was too big,
Yeah.
and he didn't
But-
want her to suffer.
Didn't want her
Okay.
to suffer, have all of her favorite things, right? And but hey, that brought it home. The real family, they used some pretty good scenes to point out to Finkel that, hey, this isn't just a story. This is real for us.
Mhm.
And that's the abstract thing that I think this narrative of the suspects are the victims, and over the last 10 years, that's what I think the media has ignored, and they don't let our guy ignore it in this film, right? The family confronts him, which is good. But you can't agree with what I'm saying, though, that lately the media, at least the last 10 years, the suspects have become the victims, and the victims have been ignored.
Well, because the suspects are what's going to give them the ratings. They want to know about the suspects, and the family, like you said, comes secondary. And I think in this movie, I think he gets a rude awakening because he figures out that he's been so wrapped up with Longo and getting his side of the story.
Yeah.
He never gets the victim's side of the story, and that's why. And I won't mention names, but certain chiefs of police or certain sheriffs will not, especially after a mass shooting, they will not mention the suspect's name. Because it's that he's not important. What's important are the victims. We need to concentrate on the victims. It's in the news media. Some aspect doesn't like that because they want to put all the attention on who this suspect was. Was he a Republican? Was he a Democrat?
Yeah.
How about his family? Was he a male or female? Was all these other aspects now that used to play into all these political. They made it a political. They were trying to make it a political statement, and to justify why this mass shooter, mass killer did that because of these reasons, not because he was mentally ill, not because he snapped, a crime of passion. It's because all these external things in his life made him do this.
Not because they're evil.
Exactly.
Not because they're evil. I know. I did a show on Legacy Tokens. It's the Nashville shooter, and they refused to release that person's manifesto, right? And the FBI sent a letter saying, well, it might cause harm to certain communities and people might take inspiration from that. And my comment was, we've been looking at school shootings for decades to develop strategies to stop them before they happen, looking at the precursors. I don't agree with what the FBI is doing, and I really felt it was more driven by political reasons, which now that Trump is in office, it seems to be a lot more politics in the FBI than I would have expected ever happened, right? And
Right.
But hey, family, right, Danny? We deal with the family all the time. It's what keeps us connected.
That's
to
right.
what is really important in law enforcement is what the families go to, and we're the ones speaking for them at times, right?
We are the voice of the victim. And so just to go back, hopefully in the next couple of days, we'll get a new FBI.
That's right. Yeah.
Hopefully today, but I know it's going to happen this week. We need a new FBI. But, we law enforcement is the voice of the victims. And homicide guys are also, they're not only the voice of the victim, they're the life of the victim in a trial. I've had several trials, jury trials, where I've gone in and friends of the suspect and a lot of the general public that's sitting in the gallery, they just can't believe that, this guy didn't do that. He's such a good guy and all this. And once you start bringing out the evidence and showing that this guy is just a total jerk and he really did do all the deeds he did, and he is a crook and he needs to go to jail, only then did the side on the suspect start to wonder about what's going on. And so it's not only just the media downplaying it all, but I think maybe the media trained the general public these days that, the suspect, he's a person too. And no, he's a suspect. There's a reason he's in jail.
Yeah, and in this case, he actually, the thing about what's important by the family, and it's the failure of Finkel to engage the family, because that's really what it is. The fact that they didn't go get, as Eric talked about, their side of the story. The fact that they didn't, at least in the book, in the movie, they don't show an exploration into who the victims were, right? Who was the wife? Who were her families? What is the truth? He only took Longo's side of the story here, and it seems basic to me that you would get all points of view. And then in the end, as I think Longo's hoping Finkel will write the story about it, how it's really the wife who did all this stuff. It's really these circumstances and events who did it. It wasn't me. And when he gets on the stand and he actually blames the wife, he says, the wife was on top of the girl, choking her. I think, let's see here. I wrote that he blames it all on his wife, blames everybody else but himself, right? But he projects his shortcomings onto his wife, which is not unusual for these people with these disorders. All of my shortcomings, I'm going to project on to my victim and suggest they had all these things. And I come from a standpoint of trying to do the right thing, right? Which I don't know how you square that circle with, I killed 4 people, but I was really trying to do the right thing. Only a narcissist can think they could spin that, but he is projecting, right? Which is not. Oh, come on, Danny. How many interviews have you done where the suspect has projected something onto somebody else, their worst shortcomings onto somebody else? Almost every time.
Just about everyone. I had one guy. This is a case from Avalon when I worked over there, and this guy, a tweaker, an islander. And what he was doing is he was breaking into hotel rooms when the guests were out and just ripping them off. Well, he finally got caught, and I'm interviewing him, and he's denying the whole thing. I didn't do this. This is so-and-so. Oh, that little girl, she must have misplaced her. And one of the things he did is he stole a suitcase that belonged to like a 5-year-old. She must have misplaced it, on and on and on. And finally, I just looked at him, at his face, and said, dude, you're an effing drug addict. And once you got in his face, then that's when he just like blah, and that happens so many times that it's not me. So and so did it. I arrested a pastor in Compton for stealing over $2 million from his church, and he denied the whole thing. It wasn't me. Oh, I deserve that money because I'm the pastor of the church and I run this church. No, you don't deserve, to have you're in Compton. You should be living in Compton, not in a $1 million house in the suburbs, with 40-inch TVs. Back then, plasmas were a big thing. You had like 40-inch plasmas in every room, an indoor swimming pool, and it's like, come on, you can't say you deserve it because you don't.
Yeah. Well, right. Yeah. And they do. I deserve it. It was right. It was okay. And in this one, he's projecting all of his shortcomings on his wife who can't fight back, which is despicable, right? But I have to say, I deserve it. You remember the scene from the movie Unforgiven? Great movie. Clint Eastwood and Gene Hackman. And Gene Hackman's been shot. Clint Eastwood's standing over him with a Sharps rifle. He says, I don't deserve this. I was building a house. What does Clint Eastwood say? William Money, deserves got nothing to do with it. It finishes them
Nobody
off,
deserves
right?
anything. You earn it.
That's right. Deserves got nothing to do with it. Yeah. But this is a typical narcissist, right? Or typical somebody on that spectrum with borderline personalities. They deflect. They don't take responsibility. It's always somebody else's fault. And in the end, I'm not surprised that he projected. And of course, any of us in law enforcement, we're not surprised on any of this. I mean, even just people who do crimes in the community that are not really violent, they're just social disorder crimes, they'll justify it to themselves over and over again. And a lot of people who are on the streets are people with borderline personality disorders. They have this, something's broken in them, and they have the inability to see that in themselves. And it is, God, we work jails. I mean, what am I thinking? Talk about the concentration of all these people with borderline personality disorders, they're there, right? And personality disorders, lots of times, not in this case, but lots of times it leads to alcohol and drugs too, right? And I remember we did a survey in the LA County jail system. Like 90% of them had drug and alcohol problems. If we'd have given an assessment on, are they on the spectrum for personality disorders, I would be surprised if 95% of them had personality disorders too, right? And if you understand criminogenic factors too. So Cam wants to get a lesson here. He says he's getting a lesson in personality disorders. So the top, when you talk about criminogenic factors, if you're trying to reduce recidivism, so number one is, let's see, it's criminal thinking, sense of entitlement. What was the other one? Criminal thinking, sense of entitlement, and God, there's 8 of them. Now I'm hanging out with people who feel that way, right? So there's one more there in that top tier one, and then there's drug and alcohol use, lack of education, lack of job skills, and schooling, right? Or no, I already said schooling. So I can't remember. There, I got 6 of them, right? So, but a lot of them in the top part of that is the criminal thinking, the sense of entitlement, impulsiveness. That's the other one, impulsiveness. And you see that with people who have borderline personality disorders. And so when you look at those things that you work on to reduce recidivism, meaning get somebody to turn away from crime, you have to focus on those top core ones. And I know you've talked a little bit about, Danny, this stuff in your book, borderline personality disorders and things like that. And that's where people are broken that you have to work on to fix. Unfortunately, narcissists present so well, it takes a long time to figure out that they're broken, right?
And they believe their own lies. They never admit that they're lying. Everything that they say is truth. So, yeah.
So what do you think, Danny? Borderline personality disorders, a lot of our criminals have that, right?
I've heard the same statistics too on the drug and alcohol use and the mental illness or the mental health issues. It's actually alarming. And
it is alarming. And I know that in LA County they got the care first, jails last thing, and I don't necessarily disagree with a focus on appropriate care, but I don't think that we ought to deviate. It needs to be. My saying is got to put the corrections back in corrections. That's what we got to do. And we never really had quality corrections, which is why we never really fix anybody. And that includes today. Even after spending $500 million at the state level, we still arrest 68% of the people released from state prisons within 3 years, which means recidivism has not gone down, no matter how hard they try and reduce the inputs by changing laws and all that stuff. They still arrest 68% of the people released from state prison within 3 years, which indicates the strategies they're using are failures. Okay, I'm got to get off my soapbox. That's the other show.
There was within the LA County jail system, when Baca was sheriff, he actually put in some programs that seemed to work and that had to do with education, and then he had the boot camp program, and those seemed to recidivism on the boot camp program.
I had to go and do an assessment on all those. So I went out and educated myself. What are the key factors of success in all those things? And most of them required cognitive behavioral therapy programs, which we didn't have. Now, if you heard my scale of things that were criminogenic factors, you could do things like, let's say somebody's in custody and they're in there a lot, and you're not getting very far on their cognitive behavioral stuff, but during the course of their time in custody, you get them to at least get a high school education. So if you start plugging away at the criminogenic factors, you increase the likelihood of success. But it's those core ones you have to deal with, the ones where you have to change their thinking. They need to change how they think.
Yeah.
And so a lot of stuff you put in did address some criminogenic factors, but they didn't address the most important ones because those are really hard to do, right? And we did try to do those things. We did have some programs because I completely revamped them. And I will say some of he was staring down the barrel of a federal indictments, for violence in the jails. Some of that was political.
Yeah. They seem to work. I think it was all cut up because of money, of course. First thing you do is
let's just say there was a lack of acceptance by the staff, because I know I implemented some of these. We put drug and alcohol treatment in the jail system, and you'd have thought, hug a thug, this and that. I go, come on, man. See, one of the criminogenic factors in drug and alcohol treatment, right? They're here. They can't go anywhere. Let's give them the treatment here. if
I think that one of the programs in late 90s, early 2000s was, I forgot what proposition, with drug court.
Yeah.
I'd work overtime at Downey Court, and I'd sit in on drug court. And man, those judges, if you stayed on course and you went to AA or NA, and they would expunge your record. But the second they came in with a dirty P test, man, they were remanded to custody immediately.
Yep.
those things do work, but they were rejected by Gascon on those things. We got one more scene we got to throw in here, guys, and before we get off on our tangent of improving the criminal justice system here, and that is the verdict. We got to talk about the verdict, and the verdict comes down, and it's interesting. I think it's interesting. The verdict comes down, and they still end up having contact, right? And obviously he's convicted. I mean, I think we all knew it was going to happen. I think everybody knew it was going to happen. I think he probably, I think even Longo knew he was going to get convicted, right? I mean, you kill 3 kids, there's no other smoking gun. Try to blame it on your wife. That's the typical blame it on the dead person.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I mean, you just show a few pictures. They're all dead. He's alive. Who did it, right? And I mean, that one's pretty easy for the jury, right? And so, and then of course, judge does, but it's the conversation afterwards, after he's convicted, the conversation that he has with Finkel in the jail, which I thought was pretty interesting. Oh, we got two scenes. I forgot. I had another scene. Just roll right into Tied Together after this scene, Martine. We got time for it. And he gets the verdict. I don't think Finkel at this point is surprised, because he did go to the investigators. They tried to give him whatever information he had.
It was too late.
A little too late. And like I said, I just don't think anybody was surprised at this verdict. There's your famous attorney there, right? Giving him the good advice. And is he doing a... Oh, he's talking to his wife. Okay, that's right. So, yeah, hopefully she's saying this chapter of their life is over with, where he's obsessed with this case. And I'd have to look at it. I wonder how much, if he still got his $250,000 advance. But after this one, he roll right in the next scene, Martine, after this one, and this is Tied Together. And it's the most, I thought it was the most interesting part of the book and the movie was, now forever, these two guys are tied together, right? Forever, no matter what happens. And Longo kind of talks about that. No matter what happens, they're tied together. They'll always be tied together. Not because he used his name, but because the reporter went down and developed this relationship with him.
Mm-hmm.
Had the reporter just ignored this and went on with his life and tried to rebuild his life in another way, Chris Longo would be nothing. Nobody would have written a book about him. There would be no movie about him, right? Because he does get what he wants. He gets more oxygen. Book gets written about him. He gets a movie about him. He's tied to this reporter, and he knows this reporter, his salvation is to tell this story.
Mm-hmm.
And even he knows it. You can see his face. He's tied to him forever.
Yeah.
And I think that's, he gave a part of his life away to this killer. Is kind of how I saw it.
Chris Longo will live rent free in Finkel's head for the rest of Finkel's life.
Yeah.
I mean, he is there, and there's no getting around it. And that's going to cause, probably has already caused Finkel some mental health issues, because he's got this living in his head now. I mean, we have seen and done things and had relationships with people that they just get up there and you're never going to get rid of them. They're always there. And that causes issues.
Well, the first road to redemption for Mr. Finkel, Eric, is that he tells the story straight.
Mm-hmm.
I got hoodwinked. I got, I got sucked in. I got played by this narcissist, and I deserve a little bit of shame, because you can see it. I mean, Hill here, he plays the role pretty good, right?
Yeah.
And you can see that he's embarrassed by this. He's telling the story here, and he's doing a book review, just like my wife's friend is doing, right? She does these things. And he sees Finkel in the back, as you said, Danny. Of course, he's not there, but he's living rent free in this guy's head, and he will for the rest of his life. This won't ever. This is trauma for him. He won't ever get away from this.
In a sense, yes, it is.
And like I said, he got what he wanted. Even when Finkel told him, he goes, if you're found guilty, I can't share any of the money that I make off this book with you. He goes, that's not my intent. I just want to tell my story, and like a narcissist, he, like you said, he lives on. He's got what he's, whatever stature he's got within the prison system, whether it's good or bad. As a child baby killer, he ought to be dead, by the code of conduct of the prisons. But he got what he wanted. He got a story. So,
and because he's there's notoriety behind him too, he'll now be in a protected part of most jails, right? He'll be protected because he's an easy target.
Yep.
He's famous, infamous, and he killed children. So which makes him a double target, right?
Yep.
In prison, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the interesting thing is the last scene where Finkel goes back. He goes to prison and visits him again.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes a realization. I think that's the part where they clearly are tied together no matter what happens moving forward. They will always be tied together. He'll be the LA Times reporter who was fired for lying and then got hooked in by the narcissist because he had hope and a belief that he could get out of it again, right? That's who he'll always be.
Yeah,
and
his legacy. That's what people remember him by.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think in the end, I mean, he tells a story and he embraces that.
Mm-hmm.
He embraces that. Well, this is my life, good or bad, and he embraces it. And that's all you can do at this point for a little bit of salvation. What do you think, Danny? That's all you can do too, right? He embraced it. That's who he is, right?
Yeah. We talking about Longo?
No, we're talking Longo. He's going to be a fantasy in his brain for the rest of his life. He believes in unicorns and fairy tales. But the reporter, who used to believe in unicorns and fairy tales, I guess, now has embraced the fact that he's the fired reporter and he's the guy who got sucked in by this narcissist. Yeah,
and he has to deal with that. I was reading the notes at the bottom at the end of the movie, and that where it said that Longo has while in prison, because we were talking about this. I go, well, he finally got the big time, finally got nationwide notoriety by this book and everything like that. And I'm going, think about the fall he has, but he didn't really fall. He was writing articles and sending them out to different publications, including the New York Times. So he's continuing to reach out and get more notoriety, because eventually he's going to crash and burn big time.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think he got the death penalty.
He got, but I don't know if Oregon does that anymore.
And then he started a charity where death penalty inmates can give their organs to people, and of course it's not going anywhere. And all I could say, this is just a narcissist trying to get more attention.
Yeah.
What's up, Martine? You're there, Martine? I think his mic is off. All right, guys. Well, we are at the end of our show. Hello.
Yes. My mic died. Yes, his sentence was commuted to life without parole.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, but if you look on it shows that he also started this charity, and it was interesting because I was reading up on the charity. While it's not working out so well, because most of the people on death row had abused drugs and alcohol their whole life, and their organs ain't worth that. They ain't worth shit. Nobody wants them, right? And or they got HIV, or they got some other blood disease that just there's no market for their stuff, right? So, but just a narcissist trying to get more oxygen. Well, thanks for joining me for my show, Eric. I appreciate you making the effort all the way up there in cold country, and good luck on your drive back to sunny California.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And Danny, thank you again. Next time I have more mass murders, I'll have you back. Okay.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate it. I really, like I said before, I really enjoy doing these. So.
All right. Well, that's it. That's our show for today. Thank you guys for joining me. Stick around for a quick debrief, and Martine, you can take it away.